Good day, good people. For those that don't know me, I go by Tobi Shinobi, and I'm happy to welcome you to the Lightroom Virtual Summit, where today, we'll be looking at the basics of how to elevate your architectural photos. That is, getting your images to a good place from a raw starting point. Let me also say that all these techniques were used to edit the images in my new book, Equilibrium, so feel free to check that out. You can see that in the link attached. To get your images to a good place, we're going to go through a few basic tips and tricks to get us on the right path. We'll start with the geometric and crop tools, then move on to the parametric and point tone curves. We'll then add some quick adjustments using the sliders located under tone and presence. And then we'll learn to tweak colors using hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. We'll finish that all off by reducing any noise and sharpening our images to give a strong final product that you can show off to your friends. Let's get started. So we're going to try and get to this image, but we're going to start off with an image that looks like this. So this is what we're aiming for, and this is what we're starting with. So first and foremost, let's start off by dealing with the geometry of the image. We can fix that by scrolling down to this area here. So we have a number of options at our disposal here. So if we hit auto, you see what it does, and that's actually done something decent. If I hit constrain crop, you'll see it's still got a little bit of extra stuff, which isn't great. We can go to level, which will make sure that the horizontal plane is level. We can click vertical. Again, it's doing something very similar to auto. And if we click full, it's done a very minor tweak. So what I'm going to do is use guided. So I can either click this here, or I can click here, and then really dial in exactly what I want to see. So what I tend to do is find an area in the image which makes sense to me. So I'll pick an area here, and you can see next to my blue cursor indicator, we have the loop, which tells me exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to pick this tile here and try and find the matching tile on the opposite side. So as we get closer, the loop gets closer, and I'm going to just put that there. I'm going to do a similar thing down here. So I will click on this corner, and you can be as precise as you would like to be. Obviously, the more time you take on it, the better effect you're going to get. And I'm going to just put that there. So it automatically gives it a little bit of a change. So before and after, you see it just brings it onto an equal setting. And then I'm going to continue by taking, let's go with one of these tiles towards the back here. I'm just going to get there, click, come down to a similar position. So let's do that there. And you can see it's already kind of pinning it in an interesting way, but it's not quite done. But we'll just do the same here. Click the tile, let's go, and come down and pin that there. And it's already just much better than what it was before. Let's see, before, after, and you can see there's still a little bit of bowing, but that's because there's distortion in the image. I shot this on a Sony camera, but with a Nikon 14 to 24 2.8, so not entirely compatible, but we can do stuff about that now. So if we go up somewhat to the lens corrections panel, we can click on distortion, and let's just go to 5. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see what 6 looks like. 6 looks good. 7, and we're at 8 now. It doesn't look too bad. Let's leave it on 8. Still got a touch of bowing, but what we can do is go up to crop and just bring this in a touch. Just leave out some of the areas that we don't. And this is one of the reasons why I like using high megapixel cameras, because we're not going to lose too much detail here. Whilst we're talking, we obviously have the crop here, and this is a particular overlay. This is one of my favorites to use. I like the diagonal kind of cross markings. It's very good for kind of just really nailing composition. So I can drag that across and just make sure that the cross really lines up in the center of the buildings, just to make sure that we're having a real precision time. But if I hit O on the keyboard, it will cycle through the various options. You see here a number of different ones. There's the different ratios. So you've got 2:3, 5:7, 4:5, the grid, the rule of thirds. And like I said, this is one of my favorite ones just for really nailing composition. And then we'll just hit done. And let's go to do before and after. You see, this image here is already a lot more compelling than what we had before. So I'll switch again. And some people will like this. This is the natural way that the image looked. If I'd have been able to get a higher vantage point, I've been able to get this image, or maybe using a tilt shift lens, I would have had less bowing. But this is what it is, and this is what we're going to work with. So let's go back to the image. So we've looked at geometry, we've looked at cropping. The next thing to do is look at the tone curve. So with the tone curve, you have a very powerful tool which allows you to add character, add depth to your images. As you can see here, the image is a little bit flat. You know, the raw image doesn't have that much depth to it, and therefore it's not as compelling, in my opinion. We can add a little bit of drama and character to it by really using the tone curve to separate the light areas, the midtones and the shadows, and just give the areas in the image either recover detail, or just give the image some more depth. And we do that using the various parts of the tone curve. So what we have here is, in the bottom area, we have the dark areas and the shadows. We have the midtones here, and then we have the whites and the highlights. So here you can see it's divided: highlights, lights, darks, shadows. And as you can see, as I go up and down, you can see the areas which are affected on the graph stroke tone curves here. We're going to start off with the point curve, which does a very similar thing, and it's worth remembering that you have the point curve and you have the parametric curve. You also have the RGB split for the tone curve, but we're not going to deal with that just yet. We'll deal with that in another class. But for now, we're going to start off with the point curve, and what I'm going to do is start off by putting points on it. That's why it has the name point curve, because you can put points on it. So you can see if I click here, I can affect it. But what I'm going to do is hit Option and reset that. Hit Option and click on Reset, it resets it. If you hit Option whilst you're over the line itself, it will keep the anchor points on that line. So what I tend to do, and you'll see this quite common for people who like to color grade in film and in pictures, you can hit Option again here to put it right in the middle, and then we'll split that line again here, and then we'll put an anchor point that's fairly equidistant between this point and the dark areas, and we'll do another one in the lighter areas. The cool thing about the Lightroom tone curve tool is that it shows you where a lot of the information is. So this area here, this dark area here, is basically the histogram showing you that majority of the information is contained here. So we don't have a massive amount of information here. It's all kind of contained here. So as I affect this, it will have an effect on the kind of darker areas. So we'll hit Command Z. I think that's Control Z on a PC. But yeah, what we're going to do is add an S-curve, and an S-curve will give you contrast. And when I say S-curve, what I'm referring to is dragging the line over to the right in the lower, darker areas, and then taking the light areas and coming to the left. And you can see it's giving the image a little bit more character. I'll show you what that looks like. Off and on, off and on. So we've added some more contrast without actually using any of the sliders found in the tone or presence sections, which people usually start off with. So this is just another way of editing. I just want to show you that you have options to do this. I'm going to add option, add another point, and I'm going to just lift. This is the black point, the area that's the darkest in the image, and just give it a little bit of fade in this area here. So I'm going to do off, on, off, and on. Let's give it a little bit more character. We'll come across a little bit here, add that there, bring this down. Let's bring this across a touch, and you can really see, you can go not too far and have a real massive difference in the image. The thing with the tone curve is to not be intimidated by it. Now, for me, that's probably a little bit too contrasting. So what you can also do is you can click here, and there's some presets under the point curve. So you just literally click down at the bottom of the tone curve tool, and there's medium contrast. You can use it as a starting point, and then I have some other ones which I've set as my own presets. So here's one I've done in the past for Adobe Live. I like this one. So you can see it's very slight tone curve, very slight S curve, and that gives us a great starting point. Then we can go to the parametric curve, and I do suggest you do it in this order. Parametric curve and the point curve do give you two options, but they do work independently of one another, so you can use them to kind of tweak one another. I suggest using the point curve and then using this to kind of really just kind of finesse. So what I'm going to do is the dark areas, let's see, with shadows, let's bring them up a touch. Let's see, come down, let's see what 10 looks like. And sometimes it's just worth playing around to see what they look like in actuality. Let's see, we'll lift up the darks a little bit, and then lights, let's see, bring that down a little bit, and then highlights, just give it a little bit of a pop. Cool, so let's go off, on, off, on. The tone curve is a really powerful way to affect your image. You can really add a signature look to your work. I suggest playing around with it. Don't be intimidated by it. So this is, for me, already starting to get to a really good place. So far, we've looked at the geometry and crop, and that's the basic tone curve we've looked at now. And so let's go to tone and presence and really get to pushing this image to a really good spot now. So, okay, cool. So exposure, I think, is fine. Let's see. Though sometimes I like to just lift it a little bit just to see if there's anything extra in the image, just to open it up a little bit. Contrast, I'm actually quite happy with. The highlight, this area seems like it could be dealt with a touch, so let's bring the highlights down a little bit here. Shadows, no, I think I'm happy with the shadows there. But then you have we have whites and blacks that we can use. I think I'm all right with where those are, actually. Let's see. So we're able to do a fair amount with the tone curve. So lift the whites a touch, blacks. Let's see. Yeah, I think I like where that is. We can do before and after. See, getting to a really good place. And then now we have the option to use the presence tools, which have a great, they can add a real great sense of character to an image. And this is where, again, use these to your taste, but don't overdo them, because you can make an image look over-processed and overcooked. And then you start to, the image can start to fall apart a little bit. And I try to go for a sophisticated look. I really don't want to add too much to an image because I'm trying to capture effectively what I saw at the time and just enhance that a little bit. Think about it like a meal. Like, you don't want to add too much salt to it. So texture, clarity, dehaze, it's like adding seasoning to it, and vibrance and saturation, it's kind of like adding sugar to something. You really want to make sure you have the best raw ingredients and then not add too much to it. And then, you know, but like I said, do it to your taste, and, you know, use this as an opportunity to experiment. So texture and clarity I like to use together. So let's add some clarity to the image. You see, I don't like to go too far with the clarity, but I do like to add some texture to it. Just give it a little bit of grit. So that's starting to look good. And then dehaze. I don't think this image needs too much in the way of dehazing. And now obviously, as the name suggests with dehaze, this is a tool which is used to remove haze from images, but you can also use it in an artistic sense to really, again, add a sense of character to your images. So just, again, use these tools under presence with caution. If you overdo it, it can end up having an image which just looks over-processed, and it can be really off-putting for some people. So let's add some vibrance to the image, and let's deal with vibrance and saturation now. So saturation looks at all of the pixels in the image, and just as a blanket approach, it will increase the saturation of the amount of color effectively in every pixel, whereas vibrance seems to be, in my opinion, it seems to take a smarter approach, and it looks at images and the areas which have less saturation and adds saturation to the areas which seem to be lacking. And so I tend to use vibrance more, but in this image, which is kind of flat anyway, it seems like we might have to do a bit of both. So let's come up with both of them. I tend not to go too hard on some of these images because I don't want the image to fall apart. But you know, with this particular image, it was the day was just kind of very grey, so this wasn't doing it, and that, you know, the building probably could have done with a fresh lick of paint. So you know, let's see what we can do. But typically I wouldn't go that high with that image. And again, you know, we're already in a very good place. This image to me just looks a lot more compelling. Let's see what else that we can do. You know, let's see, we can probably go to hue, saturation, and luminance, and let's click here and see what that, so we see it's a red, we're on luminance and saturation, and let's just, that's taking it down, let's go up a touch and just bring the color up a little bit, not too much. 15, let's see, that ought to do it. And then I'm just going to adjust these a touch, the areas around them, just to make sure we have, we don't have like jumps in color, because colors tend to not work in the spectrum. You can see that they're all linked. These are all linked on the color spectrum, and so when you adjust one, you should be mindful to adjust others. So that's looking good. So it's off, on, off, on. When adjusting your saturation and luminance, don't just think of that color in isolation. One area can be made up of multiple colors, so eyeballing it can be inaccurate. Also worth remembering that each color has its position on the color wheel. If you adjust one color, you should keep in mind those colors adjacent to keep a smoother transition from one color to another. And yes, there are some images where you may be able to get away with pushing the color very far, but there are images which may have mixed lighting, which could prove problematic. Let's go to detail. So what I'm going to do is reduce the noise, and I'm going to take this to about 20. I don't like to go too high on that. Straight out of the gate, Lightroom tends to put color noise reduction on straight away on raw images. So you'll often find that's at 25. Here we have 20 on the luminance, just to kind of even that out. But I think we're fairly good. And then once I've done my noise reduction, then I like to add sharpening to the image. So I'll hit Option while scrolling across, and it turns the image to a grayscale image, which allows you to kind of see things a little bit better. It's less distracting. So let's add sharpening of about, let's see, 75. And then with the radius, the smaller you go, this might be hard to see from the screen recording, but the smaller you go, the finer detail you'll kind of have. You'll have a smaller radius, and it's probably best for adding sharpening if you're doing something with a portrait. If you're doing some, if you're doing skin, ideally you wouldn't really want to sharpen, when it comes to portraits, because it's going to highlight all the pores and imperfections in someone's skin. So you probably want to use a smaller radius. When you have hard textures like this, you can afford to have a larger radius. I will take this to, let's do a 1.1, and we'll do fit. And then one of my favorite things to do is basically mask out, because you don't want to sharpen absolutely everything in the image. You only want to sharpen what you need to sharpen. So let's go to Option, we'll click on masking, and then as I come across to the right, you'll see less and less of the image is being sharpened, and keep on coming across, and I think 70 seems good. Let's go to 75, 70, let's go. Looks like it's going to be, I think 75 seems good. So you have a much more compelling image now. Let's see what we had. This is the image before. This is what we were kind of aiming for. You can see that I added a bit more color to the image there, but the one that we're working with, we've got this here, and let's tweak the color a little bit more. Let's go to saturation, 25, take that to 25 as well, and then just do some final touches. Bring the saturation up a little bit more. We start to get into that territory before where we were. Let's quickly see it before and after. So you can see how much we've changed that image. So there you have it. That's how you take your raw image and you step your game up to getting a more compelling and more compositionally sound image. So you just learned the basics on how to elevate your architectural photos using geometry, cropping, basic tone curve, noise reduction, and sharpening. If you're looking to step your game up even further with your photos, be sure to check out my next Lightroom Virtual Summit advanced tutorial on how to elevate your architectural photos. For more inspiration, feel free to check me out on Instagram, where I respond to each direct message, my YouTube channel for more tutorials, and be sure to check out my new book, Equilibrium, which is available for pre-order now. Until next time, take it easy.